Her billionaire husband stole her foundation for his mistress. She turned it into his downfall. Elena Vale saw Sienna Marlowe's name before she saw the stolen words. It was printed across the first page of a campaign script, left on top of a gray archive box in the cramped room beneath the Mistress Foundation's original community kitchen. Sienna Marlowe, the next chapter. Elena had come downstairs for a set of donor records requested by finance. Nothing more. She set her key ring beside the box and lifted the script with 2 fingers. Halfway down the second page, her hand stopped. "Mercy is not what we give from above," the line read. "It is what we protect beside one another." Her mother had written those words in blue ink on the back of a grocery receipt years ago. Elena could still picture the fold through the middle and the faint stain left by a coffee cup. She turned the page. Another paragraph described a winter food line, the steam rising from soup trays, and a woman who refused to take a second coat until every child had one. Elena had written that scene in her field notes after standing beside the kitchen door until midnight. In the margin of the script, a production note instructed Sienna to pause before the final sentence and deliver it as a personal memory. Elena read the note twice. Above her, a low burst of music traveled through the ceiling, followed by a man's voice counting down to another sound check. The launch film was already in production. She moved closer to the metal desk beneath the single fluorescent tube and examined the footer. Draft 7. Approved for picture lock. A date from 3 days earlier. The source column listed the Foundation archive, Julian Vale's office, and Sienna's interview materials. Elena's name appeared nowhere. She flipped back to the opening sequence. The Foundation's beginning had been compressed into 2 polished sentences about a private act of generosity that grew through Julian Vale's vision. Elena rested the heel of her hand against the desk. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. On the shelf behind her sat the original kitchen ledgers, handwritten volunteer schedules, and photographs with curled corners. None of them belonged in the version upstairs. She did not tear the script. She did not carry it out. Instead, she took out her phone, photographed the approval page, the production notes, and every passage she recognized. At the archive terminal, she confirmed that the script had passed. Through a communications folder, she was still authorized to review. She saved its history to her secure drive. Footsteps crossed the kitchen floor above. Someone laughed near the stairwell. Elena returned the pages to their exact order and placed the script on the box as she had found it. When the door opened, a young production assistant leaned in. "Mrs. Vale? They're testing the film upstairs. Mr. Vale asked if you could stay out of the main hall for another 20 minutes. Elena picked up the donor box she had originally come to retrieve. "Did he approve the final narration?" The assistant's smile faltered. "I think his office approved everything." "Has Miss Marlowe recorded it yet?" "She recorded yesterday." Elena nodded once. "Thank you." She passed beneath the assistant's raised arm and climbed the narrow stairs. At the landing, Sienna's recorded voice drifted through the closed hall doors, warm and practiced, speaking the first line Elena's mother had ever written for the mission. Elena did not enter. She stood there long enough to hear the pause marked in the margin, then walked toward the elevator, with the donor box held tightly against her ribs. By the time the doors closed, she was no longer wondering whether someone had made a careless mistake. She was wondering how many people had already agreed to tell the lie. The elevator opened onto the executive floor, and Elena stepped out carrying the donor box, as if nothing had changed. Through the glass wall of the conference room, she could already see Julian at the head of the table, one hand resting beside a silver coffee service, while Sienna stood near the presentation screen. A slide behind her read Mistress Foundation, the next chapter. Elena entered without apology and placed the box beside the empty chair reserved for her. Julian glanced at his watch. "We were about to begin." "Then begin," Elena said. No one asked why she had come from the archive instead of the main hall. The board members seated around the table avoided looking directly at her, which told her more than an explanation would have. Sienna advanced the slide. Her ivory suit caught the light from the windows, polished and deliberate against the dark city beyond them. "The spring benefit will introduce a more personal public voice for the foundation," she said. "Someone donors can connect with beyond annual reports and institutional language." Elena opened the folder in front of her. Her name appeared beneath the others in smaller type: Founder Emerita and Historical Advisor. It was the first time she had seen the title. Historical Advisor, she repeated. Julian did not look up. It preserves your role without burdening you with the operational demands of expansion. I wasn't aware I had asked to be relieved of them. A board member shifted in his chair. Julian finally met her eyes. This is not a removal, Elena. It is modernization. Sienna clicked again. A rendering of the restored train station atrium filled the screen, podium at center, foundation banner above it, press risers along the east wall. Elena recognized the room reserved for the annual benefit. Beneath the image was a sequence of names and cues. Julian would open. Sienna would introduce the campaign. Elena would appear near the end for what the schedule called a founder's blessing. She closed the folder. What exactly am I blessing? The silence lasted long enough for the ventilation system to become audible. Sienna answered first. A transition in how the mission is carried forward. Transition to what? A broader platform, Julian said. One capable of reaching the scale this work now requires. Elena looked at the slide again. Sienna's name appeared beside the words campaign chair and public ambassador. Neither title explained why her voice had replaced Elena's in the film. Was this approved by the full board? Elena asked. Julian's fingers tightened once around his pen. The communications plan does not require a governance vote. And the leadership language? There is no appointment being made at the benefit. Sienna rested one hand on the back of a chair. No one is taking anything from you. Elena turned toward her. Then why does the campaign need my mother's words in your voice? Sienna's expression changed only slightly, but Julian's pen stopped moving. One of the board members lowered his gaze to the table. Julian leaned back. Those materials belong to the Foundation archive. That wasn't my question. The campaign reflects the institution's history, he said. Not any one person's ownership of it. There it was, not denial, not surprise, but permission. Elena let the quiet settle. And you approve the narration? Julian's jaw moved once. I approve the direction. Sienna stepped closer to the table. Elena, the story has to evolve. People respond to clarity, continuity, a face they can recognize. They already recognized one. Julian cut in before Sienna could answer. This is exactly why we wanted you here today. The benefit cannot look divided. Donors need confidence, and your presence gives them that. He slid a revised program across the table. Elena's name appeared beneath Sienna's, followed by a 2-minute acknowledgement near the end of the evening. You want me on stage, Elena said, so no one asks why I'm not. Julian's expression softened into the public smile he used when a negotiation was nearly complete. I want you beside us when we introduce the future. Elena studied the program, then folded it once and placed it inside her folder. All right, she said. Sienna's shoulders eased. Julian picked up his pen again. Neither of them noticed that Elena had not agreed to the speech, the blessing, or the version of history waiting upstairs. She had agreed only to be in the room when they tried to make it official. Elena waited until the conference room had emptied before she returned to the chair Julian had assigned her. The revised program was gone from the table, but a thin packet marked Board Governance Update remained beneath a water glass. Only after the last assistant closed the door did Elena reach for it. Then she photographed the cover, noted the meeting date, and opened the donor box she had carried upstairs. The records inside went back 12 years, restricted gift letters, early board correspondence, and handwritten notes from donors who had trusted Elena before the foundation had a communications department. She placed the new packet beside them. The language was careful. No one had voted to erase her. Her authority had simply been divided into smaller pieces and reassigned under words like efficiency, continuity, and expansion. A revised committee structure moved program oversight to a board group chaired by one of Julian's development partners. Communications approval now belonged to the executive office. Founder review had become advisory and non-binding. Elena traced the dates with the tip of her pen. Each change had arrived separately over 18 months. Together, they formed a locked door. You're still here. Julian stood in the doorway, without his jacket, sleeves folded once at the forearms. Elena closed the packet. I'm organizing donor records. Finance asked for those yesterday. They'll have them. He stepped into the room and looked at the folders spread before her. You agreed to attend the benefit. I agreed to be there. That distinction may matter to you. It won't matter to anyone watching. Elena held his gaze. Who chairs the program oversight committee now? Julian's expression stayed still. Martin Keene, your partner on the Harbor District project. He is also one of the largest donors this institution has ever had. And two of the other members depend on your development grants. Julian pulled out the chair opposite her. You've spent years asking me to bring serious capital into this work. Now you object because serious people expect structure. I object when structure is used to make one person's decision look collective. His eyes moved to the old letters. The foundation outgrew the kitchen a long time ago, Elena. The mission didn't. That is the kind of sentence people applaud at dinners. It is not how an institution survives. He rose before she could answer. Don't turn the benefit into a grievance. You will only damage the people you claim to protect. The door closed quietly behind him. Elena remained at the table until the city lights appeared in the glass. Then she carried the donor box to her former office, where half the shelves had already been cleared for the new communications team. Her access card still opened the records portal. She searched the board minutes by date, then followed the approval trail attached to the campaign script. Draft 7 had passed, through Julian's office, the communications director, and a private strategy account registered to Sienna. Elena opened the account history. Most entries were routine, speech revisions, interview notes, donor profiles. One calendar attachment was not. It showed Sienna attending 3 internal leadership sessions months before her campaign title had been announced. Her name did not appear in the official minutes. Elena printed only the routing page and logged the source. She kept searching. A restructuring draft marked confidential proposed moving founder-centered legacy functions into a ceremonial office after the spring benefit. Another document recommended presenting the change publicly before formal governance questions could slow implementation. Elena read that sentence again. The benefit was not simply a celebration. It was meant to make the transition feel complete before anyone had time to challenge how it had happened. At the bottom of the draft, Julian had written 4 words in the margin. Momentum matters more than process. Elena turned to the donor box. For years, the worn binder inside had held old letters because she could not bear to throw them away. Now she removed it, cleared a space on the desk, and began creating sections. Charter. Donor intent. Board minutes. Restructuring. Campaign approval. She did not make one labeled affair. Not yet. Whatever Julian had done in private would matter only if he had used the foundation to reward it. By midnight, the binder no longer looked like a keepsake. It looked like the beginning of a record. 3 evenings later, Elena arrived at the pre-launch dinner 6 minutes before the first course and found her place card between Julian and a donor whose family had funded the original kitchen. The private dining room overlooked the river, all dark glass, white linen, and low arrangements of spring branches chosen to look effortless. At the far end, a screen waited behind velvet curtains. Sienna moved from table to table in a pale silk dress, greeting board members by name and touching their sleeves, as if she had known them for years. When she reached Elena, she stopped just long enough for the photographers to notice. I'm glad you came, Sienna said. Julian said tonight mattered to you. Elena set her purse beneath the chair. He says many things for other people. Sienna's smile held. The film is beautiful. I've heard parts of it. Julian appeared beside them before Sienna could answer. His hand settled lightly at Elena's back, a gesture meant for the room rather than for her. Let's not make the evening harder than it needs to be. Elena looked at his hand until he removed it. Dinner moved with the precision of a rehearsed event. Julian spoke about growth, regional partnerships, and a new generation of leadership. Sienna described service as the most elegant form of responsibility, and several guests wrote the phrase down. Elena said little. She watched the founding donor beside her turn the old brass lapel pin from the first food program between his fingers. When dessert plates were cleared, the lights dimmed. Julian rose. What you're about to see is not simply a campaign, he said. It is the story of how compassion becomes scale. The curtains opened. The first image showed the community kitchen door, repainted and framed in warm light. Then came archival photographs of volunteers, food crates, folding tables, and Elena standing half out of frame beside her mother. Her face disappeared beneath a slow dissolve. Sienna's voice filled the room. Mercy is not what we give from above. It is what we protect beside one another. Elena's hand stopped beside her water glass. The founding donor turned toward her, but she kept her eyes on the screen. The film moved into the winter food line. Steam rose from metal trays. A woman waited by the door in an old blue coat. Sienna described the night, as if she had been there, pausing exactly where the production note had instructed her to pause. Julian watched the guests instead of the film. When several nodded, satisfaction softened his face. The final sequence placed Sienna inside the restored atrium, walking alone beneath the foundation banner, while the words "the next chapter" appeared behind her. Applause began before the screen went dark. Elena did not join it. Sienna stood to receive the room, one hand pressed lightly to her chest. "Those words have guided me for a long time," she said, "and I'm honored to carry our founding promise forward." Elena looked at Julian. He was smiling at Sienna, not with surprise, but recognition. He knew whose words they were. He knew what the room had just applauded, and he had chosen this version because it worked. The founding donor beside Elena leaned closer. "I thought your mother wrote that first line." Elena folded her napkin once. She did. Across the table, Julian heard her. His smile remained, but his eyes sharpened. "The language belongs to the foundation now," he said quietly. "That is not the same as belonging to you," Elena replied. Sienna sat down between them in the silence that followed. "No one is trying to erase you." Elena turned to her. "Then say my mother's name." Sienna's lips parted, but no answer came. Julian reached for his wine. "This is neither the time nor the place." Elena looked around the room. The donors, the board members, the people who had just applauded a memory stripped of its owner. Then she lifted her purse from beneath the chair. "No," she said. "It's exactly the place. You simply chose the time." She left without raising her voice. In the elevator, she removed the revised Gala program from her purse and stared at the 2 minutes Julian had assigned her near the end. By the lobby, she had stopped thinking about how to protect Maris from embarrassment. She was thinking about how to protect the mission from Maris. By 9 the next morning, Elena had cleared the dining table in the townhouse and replaced breakfast with evidence. The worn donor binder lay open beneath the window, its cracked spine held together by cloth tape. Beside it sat the copies she had made. From the archive, the restructuring draft, and a legal pad divided into 6 columns. Charter, donor intent, board minutes, restructuring, campaign approval, conflict. The last heading remained empty. Elena began with the letters. She read each one aloud under her breath, not for sentiment, but for language. Funds restricted to neighborhood food access. Support conditioned on direct community programming. Annual renewal subject to mission continuity. By noon, 3 envelopes carried removable flags. One belonged to Ruth Calder, the founding donor, who had sat beside her at dinner. Elena called from the kitchen, where the old brass dedication plaque rested face down on a shelf Julian had once called clutter. Ruth answered on the 4th ring. "I wondered when you would call." Elena looked through the doorway at the binder. "I need to ask what you believed you were funding." There was a pause. "That is an unusual question. I need the answer in your words." Ruth exhaled slowly. "Your mother's program. The kitchen first, then the family grants. We gave to keep that promise intact. Did anyone tell you the spring campaign would place Sienna Marlowe at the center of that promise?" "No." "Would it change your next installment?" This silence lasted longer. "It might. But Elena, I will not be used in a war between you and Julian." Elena closed her eyes for one beat. "I'm not asking you to choose between us. I'm asking whether the foundation is representing your intent honestly." Ruth's voice softened, but not by much. "Send me the language." "Only the language." "I will." The second donor was less patient. He reminded Elena that Julian had doubled the foundation's reach and warned that public conflict could cost real families their services. Elena listened without interrupting. "Then help me prevent that," she said. "Ask for a review before the benefit. And if the answer is no, then you decide whether your name stays on the campaign." He did not promise anything. He also did not hang up. By late afternoon, Elena had confirmation that 2 future installments remained unreleased. That fact did not give her control over the money. It gave the donors a choice Julian had assumed they would never use. She prepared a briefing packet for the Foundation's outside governance council. It contained no accusations, only a timeline, selected records, and 4 questions about disclosure, donor representation, succession language, and the difference between a communications campaign and a governance action. Before sending it, she removed a photograph showing Julian and Sienna leaving a private hotel entrance. It proved betrayal. It did not, yet prove misuse of the Foundation. Elena would not build her case on humiliation. At 6, she met Miriam Shaw, a nonprofit attorney she had worked with years earlier, in the back corner of a quiet cafe. Miriam read the 1-page summary twice. What outcome are you asking for? A review, before they present Sienna as the heir to the institution. That may stop an appointment. It will not give you the Foundation back. Elena folded her hands around a cup she had not touched. I know. Miriam studied her. Do you? Outside, a delivery truck blocked the street, its hazard lights flashing against the window. Elena looked down at the binder between them. I spent years believing that protecting Maris meant staying inside it. And now? Now I need to know whether the work can survive somewhere else. Miriam sat back. That is a different question. Can it? Possibly. Through a fiscal sponsor at first. But donors cannot simply take existing charitable assets and follow you. Staff cannot be moved like furniture. The name may belong to the Foundation, not the original program name, Elena said. My mother used it before Maris existed. Miriam's pen stopped. Then prove that. Elena nodded. There was no relief in the answer, only another section to build. That night, she returned home and added 2 tabs to the binder, program name and continuity plan. The Foundation's council acknowledged receipt of her packet at 11:17 p.m. No conclusion, no promise, just confirmation that the questions required review. Elena set the phone down and looked at the empty conflict section. Then she placed Julian's calendar records beside it, unopened. She had begun with what donors were promised. Before she touched what he had hidden, she would make sure the people it served had somewhere lawful to go. Miriam called the next morning with an address and 1 warning. Do not fall in love with the space, she said. The storefront sat between a laundromat and a closed pharmacy 6 blocks from the old community kitchen. Its front window was narrow, the floor was bare concrete, and a water stain darkened one corner of the ceiling. Elena stood in the middle while the property manager explained that a neighborhood development trust could cover the first 3 months if a qualified nonprofit sponsored the program. There was room for a folding intake table, a row of chairs, and little else. Elena looked toward the window. When can the lock be changed? By noon, Miriam had arranged a call with Harbor Community Services, a fiscal sponsor that already managed small food access and family support projects. Their director did not ask about Elena's marriage. She asked for a service plan, a budget, proof that the original program name could be used, and written boundaries separating the new work from Maris assets. Elena sent the first 3 documents before the call ended. The 4th required a visit to the county archive, where she found her mother's original registration for the Harbor Table program dated 4 years before Maris Foundation existed. The name had never been transferred. She photographed the record and added it to the binder. That afternoon, Ruth Calder arrived at Elena's townhouse carrying the same brass lapel pin she had worn at dinner. Elena showed her the restricted gift language, the campaign excerpts, and the fiscal sponsor proposal. She did not show her private photographs or ask her to condemn Julian. Ruth read in silence. You have somewhere for the work to go, she said at last. A beginning, not a replacement for everything. And the families Maris serves now. The programs stay where they are unless staff, donors, and the board make other lawful choices. I'm not taking their money or their records. Ruth turned the donor letter toward herself. My next installment has not been released. That decision belongs to you. What are you asking me to do? Ask whether your intent is still being honored. Then act on the answer. Ruth removed her glasses. That is a careful way of asking me to stop a very large check. It is a careful way of refusing to make the choice for you. By evening, Ruth had sent a formal request that her pending installment be held until the governance review was complete. A second donor asked that his renewal papers be removed from the benefit tables. Neither promised to stand beside Elena in public. They did not need to. At Maris, Elena met quietly with Teresa Bell, the director of community programs, in the unused kitchen stairwell. Teresa had worked with her for 11 years. They want the senior staff behind Sienna when the film ends, Teresa said. Not speaking, just standing there. Will you? Teresa looked toward the door. People on my team have mortgages. Some of the food contracts renew next month. Elena handed her a one-page continuity plan. I'm not asking anyone to resign. Harbor Community Services has agreed to sponsor a limited program if Maris stops honoring the original work. The space is small, but it is real. Teresa read the address. Is this revenge? No. Elena held her gaze. Revenge would be burning down the only place people can still get help. Teresa folded the page and slipped it inside her notebook. Then don't ask me for an answer tonight. I won't. The call from Governance Council came after dark. The attorney's voice was measured. The records raised substantial questions about donor representation and undisclosed interests. Council would recommend postponing any formal appointment or succession vote until an independent review could begin. An hour later, the governance chair sent Elena a private message. I intend to support the recommendation. Elena read it twice. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to sit, without reaching for the binder. If the recommendation held, Julian could still host his benefit, play his film, and praise Sienna. But he could not formally crown her, while the review remained open. On the table beside Elena lay the key to the storefront, the county record bearing her mother's program name, and a receipt from storage for 12 folding chairs. Miriam had also confirmed that the old brass dedication plaque, purchased personally by Elena before Maris was incorporated, belonged to her. The structure was small. The support was cautious. Still, the work now had a lawful door of its own. Elena picked up the Gala program and drew a line through the words Founder's Blessing. Then her phone lit with a revised event notice from Julian's office. The subject line did not mention succession at all. It read, Maris Foundation Campaign Unveiling, Program Confirmed. Elena read the revised event notice 3 times before calling Governance Council. They changed the language, she said. No formal appointment. No succession vote. They're calling it a campaign unveiling. The attorney was silent for a moment. Then the recommendation still applies to governance action, but not necessarily to the event itself. They can put her on stage, show the film, call her the new voice, and claim nothing formal happened. They can try. Elena looked at the Gala program spread across her table. Julian's signature had disappeared from the succession language, but Sienna's photograph now covered the front page. Trying may be enough. By 10, Julian's office had sent a second notice to staff. Attendance at the benefit remained mandatory for department heads. Senior program employees were expected on stage for the final campaign image. Teresa forwarded it with one sentence. They found a way around the review. Elena called her. You do not owe me a public gesture. That is not what they're asking for, Teresa said. They want a picture that says we approve. Then decide what you can live with after the picture exists. Teresa did not answer. At noon, Elena's access card failed at the executive entrance. A security officer she had known for 8 years stared at the red light and tried again. I'm sorry, Mrs. Vale. Your credentials were updated this morning. Updated to what? He looked at the screen. Visitor access. Elena handed him the card. Keep it. Julian was waiting in her former office. The remaining shelves had been emptied. A cream folder sat on the desk between them. You involved outside counsel, he said. The foundation already has outside counsel. You sent them an accusation designed to freeze the benefit. I sent questions. Donors are holding money. Staff are nervous. You are creating the harm you claim to fear. Elena remained standing. You created a public succession and hid it behind a communications plan. There is no succession. Julian pushed the folder toward her. There is a campaign. Sienna will lead it. The board will review future roles when appropriate. Elena opened the folder. Honorary founder. Lifetime advisory seat. Public acknowledgement of her mother in all approved historical materials. a settlement large enough to make refusal look irrational. "What do you need from me?" she asked. "Attend. Deliver the 2-minute remarks. Confirm that the campaign reflects the Foundation's history. Stop contacting donors outside approved channels. And the review? Let counsel review whatever they like." Quietly, he leaned against the desk. "You can preserve your place here, Elena, or you can turn a private humiliation into a public collapse." She looked at the line promising that the kitchen programs would continue for 12 months. After that, budgets change. So does history, apparently. His face hardened. "This institution survived because I made it large enough to matter. It mattered before anyone knew your name." Julian closed the folder with one hand, then walked away from it. Elena slid it back across the desk. "That is what you never understood. I can walk away from the building without walking away from the work." For the first time, his composure shifted. "Only slightly. If you attend tomorrow, without accepting these terms, you will be treated as a guest. You will have no speaking role, no access to internal materials, and no authority to represent Maris. Then stop printing my name beneath the word founder." She left the office carrying nothing that belonged to the Foundation. By evening, 2 donors who had spoken cautiously with her withdrew from further involvement. One cited family business with Julian. The other feared a funding interruption. Teresa sent no answer. Governance Council confirmed that it could state only 3 things publicly. No formal succession had been approved, an independent review had been requested, and the unveiling could not be represented as completed governance action. It was not enough to stop Julian's stage. Elena sat in the empty storefront, after dark, the key beside her, and 12 folded chairs still wrapped in storage paper. She opened the binder on the concrete floor. The documents could establish what happened. They could not make anyone care. So she changed the plan. Ruth would speak only for her own gift. Teresa could refuse the stage without resigning. From counsel, Elena requested no verdict, only a clear boundary. At the top of a blank page, Elena wrote 4 lines: record, choice, refusal, continuity. Then she closed the binder. Tomorrow, Julian would still have the atrium, the cameras, and Sienna beneath the banner. Elena would enter, with no title and no permission to speak. But if the truth reached the right people, they would have to decide what their silence meant. The restored train station atrium glowed beneath rows of suspended lights, every brass railing polished, every table set, with pledge cards and embossed folders. Elena entered through the guest line carrying the worn donor binder against her side. Her badge read Elena Vale, Founder Emerita. Across the room, Sienna stood beneath the Maris banner in ivory, surrounded by photographers. Julian saw Elena before Sienna did. He gave no sign except a brief glance toward security. Then the program began. Julian spoke first, praising expansion, discipline, and a future no longer dependent on a single voice. The audience applauded. Sienna stepped to the podium as the screen behind her filled with the words "the next chapter." "Tonight," she said, "we honor the promise we inherited." Elena remained seated beside Ruth Calder. The film opened on the old kitchen door. Sienna's recorded voice began with Elena's mother's words. Ruth's fingers closed around her brass lapel pin. When the lights rose, the event moderator moved to introduce the senior staff, who were waiting near the stage. Before she could call their names, the governance chair stood from the front table. "One clarification," he said. The room settled. Julian's smile did not move. The chair looked toward counsel. The attorney rose, with a single sheet of paper. "No formal succession or leadership appointment has been approved by the board. An independent review has been requested regarding conflict disclosure and donor representations. Tonight's presentation should not be understood as completed governance action." A murmur crossed the atrium. Julian stepped toward the microphone. "This is a campaign unveiling, not a board meeting." "Then it should not be presented as an appointment," the chair replied. Ruth stood next. She did not look at Elena. "My family's pending installment is restricted to the original community programs," she said. "Until the review is complete, it will remain unreleased." A second donor removed his renewal card from the folder in front of him. Another asked an event staffer to take his name off the campaign display. Several guests stayed seated, watching. Others reached for their phones. Julian lifted a hand. A private marital grievance is being used to endanger services people rely on. Elena rose. No one had invited her to the microphone, but Ruth moved her chair aside, opening the aisle. The governance chair nodded once. Elena carried the binder to the front and placed it on a narrow table beside the podium. She opened only 4 sections. "This is the original charter," she said. "This is a restricted gift letter describing what one donor agreed to support. This is the board record that moved founder oversight into a ceremonial role. And this is the campaign draft that removed the source of my mother's words before placing them in Sienna's voice." She did not hold up the photographs she had kept out of the donor packet. Instead, she opened the conflict section to a disclosure form and the internal leadership schedule she had logged before her access was revoked, showing Sienna's private participation in planning sessions omitted from the official minutes. "The relationship matters here for one reason," Elena said. It was not disclosed, while institutional power and charitable resources were being used to elevate someone who personally benefited from Julian's decisions. Sienna stepped away from the podium. "You are making this sound as though I stole something." Elena looked at her. "You accepted a story after the people who wrote it were removed." Behind them, the moderator called the senior staff forward for the final campaign photograph. Teresa did not move. "We cannot stand behind a succession under review," she said. 2 department heads remained near the wall. 3 others stepped away from the staging line. No one resigned. No one cheered. The picture Julian needed simply failed to form. "And when your donors leave?" Julian asked Elena. "When staff lose funding, what do you offer besides damage?" Elena closed the binder. "The Harbor Table program has been accepted under an independent fiscal sponsor. A storefront has been secured. Future support can be given there lawfully. No existing Maris assets are being taken, and no one is being ordered to come with me." The press turned from Sienna toward Julian. Questions rose about the review, the disclosure form, the donor restrictions, and the film's source material. The pledge tables remained open, but the lines did not return. Sienna remained alone at the edge of the empty staging area. Julian still had the building, the board connections, and the foundation's accounts. What he no longer had was a room willing to pretend the transfer had already happened. Julian caught Elena near the west corridor as the press gathered around council. The campaign banner still hung behind him, bright and untouched above a room that had stopped behaving as planned. "You made your point," he said. "Now help me contain it." Elena kept one hand on the donor binder. "Contain what?" "The misunderstanding." He glanced toward the atrium, where staff were removing untouched pledge folders from several tables. "You can tell them the review is routine. You can say the donors overreacted. They made their own decisions. Because you gave them a performance. I gave them a record." His voice lowered. "Maris carries your history too. It carries yours louder." Julian stepped closer. "Come back tomorrow. We restore your advisory seat. You oversee the kitchen programs. I will correct the film credit and suspend Sienna's campaign role until the review is finished." Through the open doorway, Sienna stood alone beside the podium, while an assistant removed her name card. She was watching Julian, not Elena. "And what do I say tonight?" Elena asked. "That the institution is stable. That you trust the process. That our private difficulties have no bearing on the mission." Elena looked past him at the staff, who had stayed. Teresa was speaking, with 2 program managers, both still wearing Maris badges. They had not followed Elena out. They had work in the morning. Families would still arrive. Contracts still had to be honored. "You want me to lend you the trust you spent," Elena said. "I want you to protect what you built." "I did." Julian's expression tightened. "That storefront cannot replace this foundation." "It isn't supposed to." "Then what exactly have you won?" Elena let the question sit between them. The review had not removed him. The accounts had not changed hands. Half the room would return his calls once the headlines cooled. He still owned the machinery she had spent years trying to guide. "A choice," she said, "for people who thought you were the only way the work could continue." Sienna approached before Julian could answer. Her posture remained composed, but the polished certainty from the stage was gone. "Did you know council had the packet?" she asked him. Julian did not look at her. "This is not the time." "You told me the board was aligned." "The board will be." Sienna's eyes moved to the abandoned campaign folders, then to Elena's binder. In the film, Elena answered before Julian could. He knew where the words came from. Sienna looked back at him. Whatever she had expected to find in his face was not there. Julian turned to Elena. Think carefully before you walk away. The next few weeks will be ugly. Donors will hesitate. Programs may shrink. People will blame you. Some of them should, Elena said. I chose to open the record knowing the cost would not stop with you. That was the part no applause could clean away. The Harbor Table program had 12 chairs, a temporary sponsor, and enough committed funding for only a narrow first season. Marist still served hundreds. Some staff would remain, because leaving would hurt the people they protected. Some donors would wait. Some would never follow Elena anywhere. She closed the binder. But I will not lie to make your version easier to survive. Julian's phone began ringing. He looked at the screen, then at the cameras gathering near the main doors. This is not over. No, Elena said. The review is only beginning. She left him in the center of the atrium, surrounded by the event he could no longer control. Before sunrise, Elena stood outside the narrow storefront, while the laundromat next door switched on its lights. The metal key resisted once, before the lock turned. Inside, the concrete floor was cold, and the ceiling stain looked darker in the early gray. A volunteer carried in the first pair of folding chairs. Then another arrived, with a coffee urn and a box of paper cups. Teresa was not among them. Ruth was not there either. The beginning was smaller than the promise Elena had made in the atrium. It was also real. She opened the storage blanket wrapped around the old brass dedication plaque. Her mother's original program name caught the first line of sunlight through the window, Harbor Table. Elena held the plaque against her coat until the metal warmed. Then she set it inside the doorway, where everyone entering would have to pass it. Behind her, the volunteers unfolded the chairs one by one. There was no stage, no campaign film, and no veil name on the glass. At 8, someone knocked before Elena had finished arranging the intake forms. A woman stood outside holding a grocery bag in one hand and a folded referral slip in the other. Elena unlocked the door again and stepped aside. What they had built had not survived untouched. It had survived honestly. This story is a fictional narrative created for entertainment, reflection, and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real people, places, or events is purely coincidental.